the reports have a much higher degree of credibility. Well, let's get more on this with our correspondent Saiful Bahri Ismail now, and he joins us from Jakarta. Saiful, what can you tell us about Barum Shah and his terror operations in Southeast Asia?
You know, Jerry, Indonesian authorities took notice of Barum Shah in 2014 when he appeared in a YouTube video calling on Muslim youths in Indonesia and Malaysia to join IS. The release of that video led to a government ban on IS. Now, Barum Shah is believed to be leading the Southeast Asian unit of the Islamic State known as Katiba Nusantara, which aims to establish a so-called caliphate in the region. He's said to be handpicked by IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to lead the battalion of foreign fighters from Southeast Asia. Barum Shah is also reported to be responsible for, as you mentioned, organizing funding for the Islamist rebels who captured part of the southern Philippine city of Marawi in a bloody siege last year. Now, the United States had put him on a terrorist watch list due to his links with IS in January last year.
Saiful, now if the reports of his death are true, would it help to some extent in reducing terror attacks within the country as well as the region?
Well, first of all, reports of Barum Shah's death is not new. Last year, it was reported that he was killed in a botched suicide attack on Syrian troops. Now, if the reports of Barum Shah's death is true, it would certainly be a blow to pro-Islamic State forces in Southeast Asia. But his death may not necessarily help reduce the terror threat within the country and the region. In fact, terrorism experts say that if the reports were true, it would become a motivation to carry out reprisal attacks in Indonesia. Now, fighting terrorism is a continuous struggle, and we have seen in the past how leaders of terrorist groups have been killed only to be replaced by another.
So what's the bigger picture for terror issues in the region? I mean, are authorities on top of the situation, or are there still concerns about fighters returning from the Middle East?
Well, there are still fears of hardened fighters returning from Syria as IS loses its fight in the Middle East. Data from Indonesia's counter-terrorism agency showed that more than 600 Indonesians, including at least 166 women and children, traveled to Syria to join the IS. A further 482 Indonesians were deported by foreign governments trying to join IS. Now, Indonesia is still trying to revise its anti-terrorism laws, as current laws are not sufficient to crack down and prosecute Islamic State militants returning to the country. The review has been going on for about 2 years now. The process has been slow, dogged by conflicts of interest from different authorities.
Saiful, thanks very much for keeping an eye on that story for us. Saiful Bahri Ismail speaking to us from Jakarta. Now, authorities in the Philippines are gearing up for the shutdown of the resort island of Boracay. Police in Boracay held drills this morning and yesterday, simulating clashes with protesters, terrorist attacks, and even a hostage situation, although they maintain that there are no specific threats. Our correspondent Buena Bernal in Boracay tells us more about the anti-riot drills that were held today amid reactions by netizens who are calling it an overkill.
Law enforcement authorities are saying they're just doing their mandate of preparing for worst-case scenarios. But the prevailing sentiment of the ground is that the government is fearing a civil unrest. And the residents are saying that instead of these tight security measures, they should address the root causes of any possible civil unrest, which is really the displacement of thousands of workers, their loss of income. I've spoken to a parent who says his child will be forced to stop schooling in the months ahead. So a lot of the sentiments on the ground is one of palpable anger. They say they will join protests if there are organized ones in the island. But there are also those who say they won't join, saying that at this point, all has been said and done. The simulations earlier, we were there. We saw simulations of a violent protest, a hostage-taking incident. There was the sniper-initiated assault on the hostage-taker, counter-terrorism operations, rescue in an active shooting incident. So these are really comprehensive plans in terms of security. Aside from riot police or civil disturbance management personnel, there are also police on beat patrol, meaning they're assigned to certain areas, and police on foot patrol, meaning they're roaming around the island monitoring any security threats.
Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has announced several big changes in his cabinet. Fourth-generation leaders will helm two-thirds of Singapore's ministries. The latest shake-up will also see more women in the cabinet. In total, 3 office holders will be promoted and 4 backbenchers given new political appointments. Most of these changes will take effect from May 1st.
55-year-old Indrani Raja will become the 3rd female minister in the cabinet, joining Culture, Community and Youth Minister Grace Fu and Mrs. Josephine Teo, who will take over as Manpower Minister. Currently Senior Minister of State for Finance and Law, Ms. Indrani will be promoted to full minister and appointed minister in the Prime Minister's office, as well as 2nd Finance Minister and 2nd Education Minister. As a transition arrangement, she will also be made 2nd Law Minister until 30th of June. The 55-year-old, who joined politics in 2001 as an MP for Tanjong Pagar GRC, will find her education portfolio familiar territory. She was Senior Minister of State for Education from 2012 to 2015 and also played a pivotal role in enhancing the preschool sector. Meanwhile, of the 3 men who have been touted as potential prime ministers, Mr. Chan Chun Sing will be moving on to head the Trade and Industry Ministry, while Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat and Education Minister Ong Ye Kung will be staying on in their existing roles, but with expanded responsibilities. The incoming Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing will relinquish his appointment in the Prime Minister's office, but the 48-year-old will take over responsibility for the Public Service Division from Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean and remain as Deputy Chairman of the People's Association. Mr. Chan is expected to relinquish his position as Secretary General of NTUC to focus on his new portfolio. Mr. Heng will stay on in the Finance Ministry, which he has headed since 2015. The 57-year-old will take over responsibility for assisting the Prime Minister on National Research Foundation matters from DPM Teo. Speaking to reporters last week, Mr. Heng said that he would be very happy to continue at the ministry as there are many things that need to be done, which he announced in this year's budget. Mr. Ong will remain at the Education Ministry. The 48-year-old, who oversees higher education and skills at the ministry, will take over the school's portfolio from Mr. Ng Chee Meng as the ministry returns to having 1 minister. He will relinquish his appointment as 2nd Defence Minister. Mr. Ong joined the cabinet soon after being elected as an MP in Sembawang GRC in the 2015 general election.
Mr. Edwin Tong and Mr. Zaki Mohammed have been promoted to political office holders. Mr. Tong, who is MP for Marine Parade GRC, first entered politics in 2011. He is currently partner at law firm Allen & Gladhill, where he was appointed senior counsel in 2015. He will leave the firm to be Senior Minister of State for Law and Health from July 1st. Mr. Zaki, who is MP for Choa Chu Kang GRC, has been appointed Minister of State for National Development and Manpower. He first entered politics in 2006 and had replaced Madam Halimah Yaacob as advisor to Marsiling UT GRC last year after she stepped down to run for president. Meanwhile, Ms. Sun Chue Ling and Dr. Tan U Ming have been promoted to senior parliamentary secretaries. The appointments in other ministries include Communications and Information, where Mr. S. Iswaran has been made minister. He is joined by Ms. Sim Ann as the new Senior Minister of State. Mr. Heng Chee Hao will now be Senior Minister of State for Defence, while Dr. Ng Eng Han continues as Minister. Over at the Education Ministry, Mr. Ong Ye Kung has been designated Minister and will lead the whole ministry. Mr. Chee Hong Tat has been appointed as Senior Minister of State. In the Manpower Ministry, Mrs. Josephine Teo has been appointed Minister. In the Social and Family Development Ministry, Mr. Sam Tan has been appointed Minister of State, while Mr. Desmond Lee remains as Minister. There will be 3 main changes in the Trade and Industry Ministry, with Mr. Chan Chun Sing helming it. Mr. S. Iswaran has been redesignated Minister in charge of Trade Relations, while Mr. Chee Hong Tat has been appointed Senior Minister of State. Dr. Janio Puthucheary has been appointed Senior Minister of State for the Transport Ministry. Mr. Khaw Boon Wan continues as Minister. Mr. Ng Chee Meng will serve as a minister in the Prime Minister's office. Mr. Masagos Zulkifli will be taking over as Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs from Dr. Yaakob Ibrahim. Mr. Masagos continues as Environment and Water Resources Minister. Dr. Yaakob, who is also the Communications and Information Minister, is one of 3 ministers retiring from the cabinet. The others are Mr. Lim Heng Kiang, who steps down as Minister for Trade and Industry, but appointed as Special Advisor to the ministry, and Mr. Lim Swee Say, who steps down as Minister for Manpower. They will continue as members of Parliament.
Well, business news is next with Julie Yu. And Julie, you're tracking moves by one Singapore gaming company.
That's right. Razer is making a push into e-payments, and it could create one of the world's largest virtual credits platform for gamers. That story ahead.
The incumbent.
There's no other party than Barisan Nasional that will make sure the future of this nation will be intact.
And the opposition.
UMNO is no longer representing the Malays. It is representing only one Malay.
This could be probably our final chance.
Who will emerge victorious? Road to Putrajaya. Insight. Thursday on Channel News Asia.
There's a very real energy in the country, a sense that now, more than ever, we have to reinvent ourselves for the future.
Singapore Tonight keeps you up to date with this rapid and relentless, really, pace of development.
So every night we give you a wrap of the day's happenings, but it's more than just reports on government policies and business numbers.
What our seasoned journalists do is that they shed light on the issues that you really care about, because we speak to the newsmakers who are going to help you to better understand events that are changing our world. But not only that, how they're changing the lives of ordinary people, people like you and me, and helping us make informed decisions that could perhaps change the way we live.
Viewers can expect a fresh new look, fresh new perspectives on the issues, as well as exciting new digital elements that have never been seen before on Singapore News.
Your business world isn't taking a break, so we're not either.
We're coming to you live.
Starting April 7th, Asia Business First is extending to your weekends.
Washington is reportedly monitoring.
Access the week's business developments. Review our top guest interviews.
Not a trade war.
Analyse our special reports. And stay ahead with a preview of the following business week.
China topped the chart.
It's the only way to complete your business week. Asia Business First, weekend, only on Channel News Asia.
When the Jakarta blast happened and I got the alert, I sent the cameraman to the area while I stayed back to actually verify that the incident was actually genuine. Getting my facts right. During the Jakarta blast, that was actually what was, most important on my mind. During those live crosses, I was trying my best to essentially paint what I saw around me. In the days that followed the Tamrin attack, what we were able to do is get an exclusive interview with the Jakarta Police Chief, Tito Karnavian. He shared with us about the fact that the police came to know that there were plans to make similar attacks elsewhere in the country. We've existed in Jakarta for more than 10 years. So that helps a lot in clinching interview with newsmakers.
A new international agreement could be in the pipeline. It will either replace or broaden the Iran nuclear accord that has divided the US and Europe. Police armed with assault rifles have been stationed at the entry points to Boracay ahead of tomorrow's start to the island's temporary closure. Shares in farmer giant Takeda tumbled this morning after it upped its takeover bid for Ireland Shire to $64 billion.
Your business news this hour. Japan's Takeda has reached a preliminary agreement to buy London-listed drug maker Shire for about $65 billion. And this, according to the two companies, a day ahead, that is, of the deadline for making a formal offer. Investors remain skeptical about the Takeda's expansion plans. Its shares are getting slammed down by about 6.3%. Takeda has made other pricey acquisitions in recent years, but the Shire acquisition would be by far its biggest gamble and Japan's biggest ever overseas acquisition. A matchup with Shire will bring in a number of rare disease drugs that will catapult Takeda's into the world's top pharma companies. Shire has long been seen as a likely takeover target. It was nearly bought by U.S. drug maker AbbVie 4 years ago. Several deal makers said this mega merger could push other big players such as Pfizer to make a similar move. The world's largest publicly traded copper producer, Freeport-McMoRan, had its worst trading day in 2 years. But this steep decline led the shares to down nearly 15%. That makes it the worst performer as S&P 500, and it was triggered by its troubles in Indonesia, as Chani Vavani explains.
Freeport-McMoRan's troubled saga with Indonesia continues, and investors are less than happy. The two parties continue to hash it out, with Indonesia adding to its list of demands for Freeport. The company reportedly said that Indonesia's Environment Ministry wants it to manage the disposal of mine waste, or tailings as it's called, in a different way. Now, the current disposal system has been in place for the last 20 years, and CEO Richard Atkerson, according to a Reuters report, in a conference call said that a previous agreement with the Indonesian government saw the company retaining 50% of the tailings on land. Indonesia is now saying that it should be 95%. The CEO at the conference call reportedly said that this just cannot be done. Remember, Indonesia is looking to have a 51% ownership of Grasberg mine, the world's second largest copper mine, and Freeport currently controls some 91% of Grasberg, with Indonesia owning the rest. Freeport has been told to divest its Grasberg shares to local investors to meet Indonesia's ownership objective, and all of this to give Indonesians greater control of the country's natural resources.
And other stories we're tracking for you this hour. General Motors and Seoul are reportedly in talks to increase the $2.8 billion investment into its loss-making unit in South Korea. The move comes just 2 days after GM averted bankruptcy for the unit, reaching a last-minute deal with its union. GM Korea, which includes 4 auto assembly plants and 4 engine plants, has been losing money for years. Upping the investment would pave the way for 2 new sport utility vehicles to be built in Korea if the union and government support the project. And when the Macau shares slipped this morning in Hong Kong, trading lower by 3.6% and 5.3% at one point. The dip in trade comes after its parent company, Wynn Resorts, said it has swung to a loss in the first quarter. That was despite a boost at its gambling business in Macau, where revenue climbed over 10% to reach almost $540 million. The Wynn Resorts attributed the loss to a nearly $440 million litigation settlement expense linked to founder Steve Wynn's departure from the casino giant. And in its latest push into e-payments, Razer plans to fully acquire e-payments platform MOL. The gaming company intends to buy out the 65.1% stake it doesn't already own for $61 million. Now, the acquisition would combine virtual credits from Razer's Z Gold and MOL's MOL Points. Razer CEO Tan-Ming Lian said this could create one of the world's largest virtual credits platform for gamers, and the deal is subject to approval from MOL shareholders. But Razer said it has already secured support from other major shareholders. Razer announced earlier this month that it would launch the digital game distribution platform in Southeast Asia, starting with Singapore. The Razer Game Store will be on Lazada's e-commerce platforms. And Jerry, if you remember, last August, Razer CEO took up that challenge by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to drop a proposal for the improvement of e-payment systems in Singapore. And it looks like the latest acquisition plan puts the company in a better position to make good on its proposal to Prime Minister Lee.
Well, Julie, you've got a great memory. But, Mr. Tan also said to look forward to some, big news in esports, e-payment and gaming. I wonder what he has up his sleeves.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so we'll hear from you a little later in this show.
Thanks, Jerry.
But for now, let's go over to South Korea, where the first joint rehearsals underway for the historic Inter-Korean Summit this Friday. South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un are due to meet at the Peace House in the Truce village of Panmunjom. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-wha has called this meeting a chance to confirm North Korea's commitment to denuclearization. The top diplomat also added the event, the first meeting between leaders of the two countries in 11 years, will lay the cornerstone for a new start toward peace. In a briefing this morning, the Presidential Blue House released details on the layout of the summit venue and revealed an attention to the fine points, down to even the furniture and paintings at the site. Our senior correspondent Yim Yeon-suk reports.
This is the first time ever that a summit meeting between the leaders of the two Koreas are going to be held there in Peace House, and that's why they've had to carry out the renovation and all the construction work. We're also told that there's going to be an oval-shaped table that will be placed inside that room for that summit meeting, and it's 2018 millimeters long to signify that 2018, the year of 2018, as the historic year when the two leaders of South and North Korea meet in the Truce village of Panmunjom. Now, we're also hearing that South Korea's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong traveled to the United States to meet his U.S. counterpart John Bolton, and the two carried out a meeting for about 2 hours, for about 1 hour. And it seems like they talked about the preparations that are underway right now between the two Koreas, and also about this denuclearization issue, which will be topping the agenda when the leaders of the two Koreas meet. Now, they also said that South Korean President Moon Jae-in will be having talks with the U.S. President Donald Trump right after that Inter-Korean Summit, very possibly to inform him of the outcome of that historic meeting. We're also hearing that it is very possible that the leaders of South Korea, the United States, may meet again before that historic meeting between the United States and North Korea. And many experts here are saying that it's very possible that President Moon Jae-in wants to meet in person, face-to-face with U.S. President Donald Trump ahead of that meeting with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, just to make sure that he understands everything that was discussed at this Inter-Korean Summit meeting on Friday before he meets with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So lots happening here in the Truce village of Panmunjom, but also here in Imjin-gak, which is very close to Panmunjom.
Still ahead, reworking the Iran nuclear deal. We'll have more with our guests later on.
Malaysia Votes 2018. Where will the fiercest contests be fought? Which states will see multi-cornered contests? On Saturday, Channel News Asia brings you exclusive coverage of Nomination Day, starting from 7 a.m. Join our network of correspondents from across the country as they report live on the contests. Where will the battleground states be? Which will be the swing states of the Malaysian election? Find out on Malaysia Votes 2018 Nomination Day, only on Channel News Asia.
One of the advantages of leaving office and then going out and seeing the world is that it gives you a different perspective.
Tony Blair,